The dust swirled across the barren street of Promise Creek as Katherine Morgan clutched her children tightly against her skirts, watching in horror as three men on horseback approached her modest cabin. It was 1878 in the unforgiving Montana Territory, and being a widow with two small children meant vulnerability that predators could smell from miles away. "Get inside, Elizabeth James," Katherine whispered urgently to her 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son. "Go to the hiding place we practiced." The children's eyes widened with fear, but they obeyed, scurrying inside the small wooden structure that had been their home for the past 3 years, since their father had died in a mining accident. Katherine watched them disappear before turning to face the approaching riders, her heart hammering against her ribs. The lead rider, a man with a pockmarked face and eyes as cold as winter, pulled his horse to a stop just feet from where she stood. She recognized him immediately: Jeremiah Slater, the man who had been trying to buy her land for months. "Mrs. Morgan," he drawled, tipping his hat in mock politeness. "Lovely day, ain't it?" "What do you want, Mr. Slater?" Katherine's voice was steady despite her fear. "Same thing I've always wanted, madam. This here land sits right where the railroad's planning to come through, worth a fortune to the right buyer." He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "My offer still stands. $500 is more than generous for a widow woman with no man to work this dirt." Katherine lifted her chin. "And my answer remains the same. This land is not for sale. It's all I have to leave my children." Slater's smile faded. "That's mighty unfortunate. See, I've run out of patience. And I've got papers here saying this land belongs to the bank now." He pulled a folded document from his vest pocket. "Your husband left some gambling debts that have come due." "That's a lie," Katherine said, her voice rising. "Thomas never gambled a day in his life." "Court says different," Slater replied, nodding to his companions who dismounted. "You've got till sundown to clear out." Katherine backed toward her door. "This is my home. You have no right." "We got every right," Slater interrupted, his voice hardening. "Boys, help Mrs. Morgan understand her situation." The two men started toward her, and Katherine felt terror grip her heart. She turned and ran inside, slamming the door and dropping the wooden bar across it. She could hear her children whimpering from their hiding place beneath the floorboards. "Mama!" Elizabeth's voice was small and frightened. "Stay hidden," Katherine ordered, grabbing her late husband's shotgun from above the fireplace. She had never fired it, but they didn't need to know that. The door shuddered as one of the men threw his weight against it. Katherine raised the shotgun, aiming it at the entrance. The bar across the door wouldn't hold for long. "Get off my property," she shouted, hoping her voice didn't betray her fear. Slater's laugh came through the door. "Your property? Not anymore, Mrs. Morgan, not anymore." The door splintered as they rammed it again. Katherine's hands trembled on the shotgun. Just as the bar began to give way, she heard the thunder of approaching hoofbeats and a voice she didn't recognize bellowing across the yard. "What in tarnation is going on here?" The assault on her door halted. Through the window, Katherine glimpsed a tall man on horseback, flanked by a young girl who couldn't be more than 14 or 15. The man wore a dusty duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. "This ain't your concern, stranger," Slater called back. "Private business between me and the widow here." "3 men threatening a woman alone sure looks like everyone's concern to me," the stranger replied, dismounting with fluid grace. "Miss, you stay on your horse," he said quietly to the girl, who nodded but looked ready to spring into action if needed. Katherine cracked open the door, still clutching the shotgun. The stranger stood between Slater's men and her home, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, when they briefly met hers, were startlingly blue. "Madam, you all right in there?" he called without looking away from Slater. "They're trying to take my home," Katherine replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "They have false papers claiming my husband owed gambling debts." The stranger nodded slowly. "That right. Funny how those debts always seem to appear after a man's gone to his reward." He shifted his stance slightly. "Got a name, friend?" "Noah Ryder," he answered, addressing her while keeping his eyes on the three men. "This here's my daughter, Sarah." The girl on the horse lifted her chin in greeting, her eyes fierce despite her youth. Slater spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dirt. "Like I said, Ryder, this ain't your affair." "We've got legal papers, let's see these legal papers then," Noah interrupted, holding out his hand. Slater hesitated, then handed over the document. Noah unfolded it carefully, scanning its contents. "Interesting," he said finally. "This paper's signed by Judge Wilson." He looked up, his expression hardening. "Only problem is Judge Wilson died 2 months ago. I know because I attended his funeral in Helena." Slater's face darkened. "You calling me a liar, I'm calling you a forger," Noah replied calmly. "And a poor one at that." One of Slater's men reached for his gun, but Noah was faster. In a flash, his revolver was in his hand, cocked and aimed. "I wouldn't," he said softly. Katherine watched the standoff, her heart in her throat. Elizabeth and James had emerged from their hiding place and now clung to her skirts, wide-eyed and trembling. "Take me, not my children," she cried, falling to her knees, placing herself between the gunmen and her little ones. "Please, whatever happens, don't hurt my babies." Elizabeth wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. "Mama, no." Noah's eyes flicked briefly to the scene behind him, the terrified mother shielding her children with her own body, and something in his expression shifted. "Slater," he said, his voice like steel, "you and your boys are going to mount up and ride away now. And if I ever see you or hear of you troubling Mrs. Morgan," Katherine supplied. "Katherine Morgan." Mrs. Morgan again. "What happens next won't be a conversation." For a moment, the tableau held 3 against 2, not counting Katherine with her unfired shotgun. Then Slater gave a curt nod. "This ain't over," he muttered, climbing back onto his horse. His men followed suit, and the 3 of them rode off in a cloud of dust. Only when they were well out of sight did Noah holster his weapon. He turned to Katherine, who was still kneeling in the doorway, her children clutched to her breast. "They'll be back," he said simply. "Maybe not today, but soon." Katherine rose shakily to her feet. "Thank you, Mr. Ryder." "I don't know how I can repay you." "No need for repayment, madam. Just did what any decent man would do." He tipped his hat to her, then looked down at the children. "These your little ones?" Katherine nodded, placing a protective hand on each child's shoulder. "Yes, Elizabeth and James." Noah crouched down to their level. "Pleased to meet you both. This here's my daughter, Sarah." The girl had dismounted and now stood beside her father, regarding the family with solemn eyes. "Pa, we can't just leave them here," she said quietly. "Those men will come back for sure." Noah sighed, standing up straight again. "You're right about that." He looked at Katherine thoughtfully. "Mrs. Morgan, do you have any family nearby? Anyone you could stay with for a spell?" Katherine shook her head. "No, my parents are back east and Thomas's family. They never approved of our marriage." She squared her shoulders. "This is our home. I won't be driven from it." Noah rubbed his jaw, considering. "Well then, if you've no objection, Sarah and I might camp on your property for a few days, just until we're sure Slater and his boys have moved on." Katherine hesitated. Having a strange man, even one who had just saved her camping on her property, wasn't proper, but neither was being murdered in her bed by Slater and his thugs. "We've got a barn," she said finally. "It's not much, but there's clean hay and it's dry." "That's more than generous," Noah replied with a slight smile. "Much obliged. Sarah approached the children cautiously. "How old are you?" she asked Elizabeth. "8," Elizabeth answered, her voice small but curious. "James is 6. Sarah nodded seriously. "I'm 14. Do you like horses?" "Our mare Daisy is real gentle." As the children cautiously began to converse, Katherine found herself studying Noah Ryder more carefully. He was older than her by perhaps a decade, putting him in his late 30s. His face was tanned and lined from years under the sun, but his eyes were kind when they met hers. "Mr. Ryder," she began, "I appreciate your help, truly I do, but I can't help wondering why you're willing to risk yourself for strangers." Noah's gaze drifted to the children, now being shown how to pet Daisy's nose by Sarah. "Mrs. Morgan, some men can ride past trouble and some can't. I'm the second kind." He paused. "Besides, Sarah's mother died when she was born. I raised her alone, knowing what it is to protect a child at all costs." Katherine felt tears stinging her eyes at his simple explanation. "Thank you," she whispered. Noah nodded once, then turned to retrieve his saddlebags from his horse. "Let's get settled before dark, shall we? Sarah and I can help with any chores you might have." As the sun began to set, Katherine found herself sitting on her small porch, watching as Noah chopped wood with practiced ease. The children were helping Sarah collect eggs from the few chickens Katherine kept, their laughter drifting across the yard. It had been a long time since she'd heard them laugh so freely. Inside, a stew bubbled on the cook stove heartier than usual thanks to the rabbit Noah had shot on the ride-in. Katherine hugged her shawl around her shoulders, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through her chest as she watched this stranger who had inserted himself into their lives so seamlessly. "Mrs. Morgan," Noah called, setting down the axe. "I think that's enough wood to last you a while." "Katherine," she corrected him, surprising herself. "Please call me Katherine." A smile touched his lips. "Katherine," he agreed, approaching the porch and removing his hat. "Something smells mighty fine." "Rabbit stew," she replied. "It's the least I can do to thank you." "You and Sarah will join us for supper, of course." "We'd be honored," he said, ducking his head slightly. That night, after the meal had been eaten and the children put to bed, Katherine sat across from Noah at her kitchen table, a lamp burning low between them. Sarah had fallen asleep in a chair by the fire, exhausted from the day's excitement. "Tell me about Slater," Noah said quietly. "Why is he so determined to get your land?" Katherine sighed, cradling a cup of coffee between her hands. "The railroad's coming through. There's talk they'll build a depot near here, which means wherever they do will become a proper town. Thomas bought this land years ago before anyone cared about it. Now suddenly it's worth something." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "And you've no intention of selling?" "This is all I have to give my children," Katherine replied, her voice firm. "Thomas died making a future for us. I won't throw that away." "It's admirable," Noah said, "but dangerous." Katherine met his gaze steadily. "Life out here is dangerous, Mr. Ryder. That's nothing new." "Noah," he corrected with a small smile. "Noah," she echoed, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. She looked away, clearing her throat. "If you don't mind my asking, what brings you and Sarah to these parts?" Noah leaned back in his chair, his expression growing distant. "We've been drifting since my wife died. I was a ranch foreman down in Wyoming for many years, but the owner sold up last spring. Sarah and I have been heading west since then, looking for a place to settle." "Just the two of you?" Katherine asked softly. Noah nodded. "Just us. Sarah's mother, Hannah, died bringing her into the world. It's been the two of us ever since." Katherine reached across the table impulsively, placing her hand over his. "I'm sorry. I know how hard it is to lose someone you love." Noah looked down at their hands, then back up at her face. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of shared grief and resilience. "It's late," Katherine said finally, withdrawing her hand. "You should get some rest. The barn has fresh hay laid down." Noah stood, gently lifting his sleeping daughter in his arms. "Thank you for your hospitality, Katherine." She watched from the doorway as he carried Sarah to the barn, his silhouette strong against the moonlit yard. For the first time since Thomas had died, Katherine felt something stir within her that she had thought long buried hope, and perhaps something more dangerous. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Katherine woke to the smell of coffee brewing and the sound of quiet conversation in her kitchen. Quickly dressing, she emerged from her bedroom to find Noah at her stove, frying bacon, while Sarah set the table. Her children sat watching in fascination as these strangers moved about their home with casual ease. "Good morning," Noah said, looking up with a smile that warmed his eyes. "Hope you don't mind. Thought we'd get breakfast started as thanks for putting us up." "Not at all," Katherine replied, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly conscious of her appearance. "That's very kind." The domesticity of the scene struck her, how natural it felt to have Noah in her kitchen, how easily Sarah interacted with her children. It was a glimpse of what family life might be like, and the realization both comforted and frightened her. After breakfast, Noah announced his intention to ride into town. "Need to get a feel for the place," he explained. "Find out what kind of man this Slater is, who his friends are." "I'll come with you," Katherine said immediately. Noah shook his head. "Best if you stay here with the children. Sarah can help keep watch." "This is my fight," Katherine insisted, lifting her chin. "I should be part of it." Noah studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but the children stay here with Sarah." Elizabeth protested immediately. "I don't want Mama to go." "What if the bad men come back?" Sarah put an arm around the younger girl's shoulders. "Don't you worry about that. I'm a real good shot and I'll keep you safe. Besides, your mama will be with my pa and he's the toughest man in the whole territory." Katherine knelt before her children. "I'll be back before you know it. You mind Sarah now, you hear?" The ride into Promise Creek took less than an hour. It was a small settlement, a main street with a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses. As they tied their horses outside the general store, Katherine was acutely aware of the curious glances cast their way. "Folks don't see you in town much?" Noah asked quietly. Katherine shook her head. "Not since Thomas died. It's hard to make the trip with two small children and—" She hesitated. "Some people think a woman alone isn't respectable." Noah's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as they entered the store. The proprietor, a balding man with spectacles, looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Morgan, been a while since we've seen you." His eyes darted to Noah. "Who's your friend?" "Mr. Ryder is helping me with some repairs," Katherine said smoothly. "Mr. Hayes, we need some supplies." As they gathered what they needed, Katherine was aware of Hayes watching them closely. When Noah stepped outside to secure their purchases to the horses, Hayes leaned across the counter. "You be careful, Mrs. Morgan," he whispered. "Slater was in here yesterday, making all kinds of threats about you and your place. Said he'd get that land one way or another." Katherine's stomach clenched. "Thank you for the warning, Mr. Hayes." Outside, she relayed the information to Noah, who nodded grimly. "Let's check the saloon. That's where we'll learn the most." The Rusty Nail saloon was half full despite the early hour. Conversation dimmed as Katherine entered alongside Noah, the sight of a respectable woman in such an establishment causing a stir. Noah guided her to a table in the corner, positioning himself so he could see the entire room. "Wait here," he murmured, approaching the bar. Katherine watched as he spoke with the bartender, their conversation too low for her to hear. After a few minutes, He returned with 2 cups of coffee. "Slater works for a man named Vernon Caldwell," Noah said quietly. "Caldwell's buying up land all along the proposed railroad route. He's got connections back east with the railroad company. And he sent Slater to intimidate me into selling," Katherine concluded. Noah nodded. "Caldwell's staying at the hotel down the street. Fancy man from Chicago, according to the bartender." Katherine set down her cup. "I want to meet this Mr. Caldwell." Noah's eyebrows rose. "That might not be wise." "I need to look in the eye of the man who's trying to steal my children's future," Katherine insisted. After a moment, Noah nodded. "All right, but you follow my lead." The Promise Creek Hotel was the most impressive building in town, 2 stories of painted clapboard with actual glass windows. Inside, a nervous clerk directed them to the dining room where Vernon Caldwell was taking his lunch. Caldwell was a portly man in an expensive suit, his mustache waxed to precise points. He looked up in irritation as they approached his table. "Mr. Caldwell," Noah said, his voice pleasant but firm. "My name is Noah Ryder. This is Mrs. Katherine Morgan." Caldwell's eyes narrowed at Katherine's name. "Mrs. Morgan, I've heard of you." He did not invite them to sit. "I understand you're interested in my property, Mr. Caldwell," Katherine said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm here to tell you personally that it's not for sale at any price." Caldwell dabbed at his mouth with a napkin. "Everyone has a price, Mrs. Morgan. It's simply a matter of finding it." "Not me," Katherine replied. "That land is my children's legacy." Caldwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A legacy of dirt and struggle hardly seems worth fighting for." "It's our home," Katherine said, her voice rising slightly. "And your man Slater tried to take it by force yesterday with forged papers." Caldwell glanced around, aware they were drawing attention. "I know nothing of any forged papers. Slater sometimes shows excessive enthusiasm in his negotiations." "Where I come from," Noah interjected, "we call that criminal behavior." Caldwell's face hardened. "And who exactly are you in this matter, Mr. Ryder?" "A concerned citizen," Noah replied evenly. "One who doesn't take kindly to seeing 3 men threatening a woman and her children." "How noble," Caldwell said, his tone making the word an insult. "Mrs. Morgan, my final offer is $800 for your property. That's more than generous." "The answer is still no," Katherine said firmly. Caldwell shrugged. "Then I'm afraid I can't be responsible for what happens next. These frontier territories can be so unpredictable." Noah leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "That sounded very much like a threat, Mr. Caldwell. I'd reconsider your words carefully." For a moment, the 2 men stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Then Caldwell leaned back, forcing a smile. "Merely an observation about the realities of life out here," he said smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, my meal is getting cold." Outside the hotel, Katherine released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Noah shook his head. "Men like that don't give up easily, but neither do we." On the ride back to the homestead, Katherine found herself studying Noah's profile against the afternoon sky. "Why are you helping us?" she asked suddenly. "You could have ridden on after yesterday. This isn't your fight." Noah was silent for a long moment. "When my Hannah died, I promised her I'd raise Sarah to know right from wrong, to stand up when standing's needed." He glanced at her. "What kind of example would I be setting if I rode away from this?" "You're a good man, Noah Ryder," Katherine said softly. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, something that made her breath catch and her heart beat faster. "Not always," he replied quietly, "but I'm trying to be." They returned to find Sarah teaching Elizabeth how to braid a horse's mane while James watched from atop a fence post. The domestic scene brought a lump to Katherine's throat. how quickly her children had taken to these strangers. How natural it seemed to return home to find them there. That evening, after the children were asleep, Katherine and Noah sat on the porch steps, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Sarah had retired to the barn early, claiming exhaustion, though Katherine suspected the girl was giving them time alone. "What will you do when this is over?" Katherine asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Noah considered the question. "Keep heading west, I suppose. Find somewhere to settle. Sarah needs stability, a proper home." "She's a remarkable girl," Katherine said. "You've done well with her." "She practically raised herself," Noah replied with a self-deprecating smile. "I just tried not to get in her way too much." Katherine laughed softly, then sobered. "I worry about Elizabeth and James growing up without a father. Thomas has been gone 3 years now, but they still ask about him." "Children are resilient," Noah said. "And they have you. That counts for a lot." "Some days I don't feel like enough," Katherine admitted, voicing a fear she rarely acknowledged even to herself. Noah turned to look at her, his face half illuminated by the lamplight spilling from the window. "From what I've seen, you're more than enough, Katherine Morgan. You're everything those children need." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. Without thinking, she leaned into him, and his arm came around her shoulders naturally, as if they had sat this way 100 times before. They remained that way for a long while, watching the stars and drawing comfort from each other's presence. The peace was shattered the next day when Slater and 5 men rode onto the property just after noon. Noah was splitting wood while Katherine hung laundry, the children playing nearby under Sarah's watchful eye. "Get inside," Noah called sharply to Katherine and the children. "Sarah, rifle." His daughter disappeared into the barn and emerged moments later with a Winchester repeater, which she handed to her father before ushering Katherine and the children toward the house. "Stay here with Mrs. Morgan," Noah instructed Sarah, who looked ready to protest, but nodded reluctantly. Katherine watched from the window as Noah walked calmly to meet the riders, rifle held loosely but ready in his hands. Slater sat atop his horse, a smug smile on his face. "Mr. Ryder," Slater called. "Hoped we'd find you here. Mr. Caldwell would like another word." "Mr. Caldwell knows where to find me if he wants to talk," Noah replied. "Don't recall inviting you onto this property." A well-dressed man, not Caldwell, but someone with the same city polish, nudged his horse forward. "I'm Martin Reed, Mr. Caldwell's attorney. I have here a court order authorizing us to take possession of this property immediately." He extended a document, which Noah took and examined carefully. "This is signed by Justice Patterson of the Territorial Court," Noah said, his voice carrying to where Katherine stood listening. "Interesting, since Justice Patterson is currently in Washington for the congressional hearings. I know because my brother clerks for him." The attorney's confidence faltered. "The signature is legitimate. It's another forgery," Noah cut him off, his voice hardening. "Just like the last one." "That's a federal offense, counselor. Might want to consider if Mr. Caldwell's money is worth the risk of prison." The lawyer's face paled. "I was assured the documents were in order." "You were lied to," Noah replied. "Now I suggest you and these gentlemen leave before things get unpleasant." Slater's hand moved toward his gun. "We ain't leaving without the deed to this property." Noah raised the rifle to his shoulder in one smooth motion. "I count 6 of you. I've got 16 rounds in this Winchester. Those aren't odds I'd want to test." "The lady and her brats have to sleep sometime, Ryder," Slater said, his voice ugly with threat. "You can't watch them forever." "That sounds remarkably like a death threat, Mr. Slater," came a new voice. Katherine turned to see Sheriff Malcolm Davis riding up from the other direction, 2 deputies flanking him. "I don't take kindly to those in my county." Relief flooded through Katherine. Sheriff Davis was a fair man who had been friends with Thomas. She hadn't seen him in months, but his arrival couldn't have been more timely. Slater scowled. "Sheriff, we're just here on legal business for Mr. Caldwell. With forged court documents." The sheriff dismounted, approaching Noah and taking the paper from him. "This is serious business, Slater. I'll be having words with Mr. Caldwell about this." The attorney looked nervously between Slater and the sheriff. "I had no knowledge save it for the judge," Sheriff Davis interrupted. He looked at Slater and his men. "You boys can either ride out of here now or ride to my jail. Your choice." For a tense moment, Katherine thought Slater might choose violence. Then he spat on the ground and wheeled his horse around. "This ain't over," he muttered as he rode off, his men following. The attorney hesitated. "Sheriff, I assure you, Mr. Reed, I suggest you have a very direct conversation with your client about the consequences of forgery and intimidation," the sheriff said coldly. "Next time, I won't be so understanding." When they had gone, Katherine rushed outside, her children and Sarah following. "Sheriff Davis, thank you." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Mrs. Morgan, been too long." He glanced at Noah. "Don't believe we've met, but I'm obliged to you for looking out for Katherine and the little ones." "Noah Ryder," Noah introduced himself, shaking the sheriff's hand. "This is my daughter, Sarah. Pleased to meet you both." The sheriff turned back to Katherine. "Got word from Hayes at the general store that Caldwell's men were making threats. Thought I'd ride out and check on you." "Your timing was perfect," Katherine said gratefully. "Wish I could say this is the end of it," the sheriff said, his expression grave. "But men like Caldwell don't give up easily. They just find more subtle ways to get what they want. What can we do?" Katherine asked, unconsciously moving closer to Noah. "I'll have a deputy ride by regular, but I can't post a man here full-time," Sheriff Davis said apologetically. "Best thing would be if you had someone staying here, at least until Caldwell moves on to easier targets." Noah cleared his throat. "I'd be happy to stay on a while longer if Mrs. Morgan has no objection." Katherine felt a flush rise to her cheeks as both men looked at her. "We would be grateful for your continued protection, Mr. Ryder." The sheriff looked between them, a knowing expression crossing his face. "Well then, seems like things are settled for now. I'll be heading back to town. Got a few questions for Mr. Caldwell about his business practices." After the sheriff departed, Katherine found herself facing Noah across the yard, suddenly shy. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. "You and Sarah probably have places to be." Noah shook his head. "No place we need to be. No place we'd rather be, truth be told." He glanced at Sarah, who was showing Elizabeth how to twirl a lariat. "Haven't seen her this happy in a long while." "Nor my children," Katherine admitted. She took a deep breath. "Stay, then, at least until we're sure the danger has passed." The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Noah repaired fences, chopped firewood, and tended to the small herd of cattle that had been neglected since Thomas's death. Sarah helped Katherine with household chores and became an older sister figure to Elizabeth and James, teaching them to ride properly and showing Elizabeth how to braid her hair in the latest fashion. In the evenings, they would gather around the table for meals, then sit by the fire while Noah told stories of his travels or read from one of the few books Katherine owned. It was a picture of family life that Katherine had thought lost to her forever, and she found herself dreading the day when Noah and Sarah would inevitably move on. A week passed without incident. Then, too, Sheriff Davis rode out to inform them that Caldwell had left town, apparently giving up on acquiring Katherine's land after the sheriff had threatened him with prosecution for the forged documents. "Seems he's decided your piece of property isn't worth the trouble after all," the sheriff said with satisfaction. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Katherine sensed a shift in Noah's demeanor. "I suppose you'll be moving on soon," she said, trying to keep the sadness from her voice. Noah was silent for a long moment. "That was the plan," he finally said. "But plans can change." Katherine's heart quickened. "What do you mean?" Noah turned to face her, his expression serious. "Katherine, these past weeks, they've meant something to me, to Sarah too." "They've meant something to us as well," Katherine replied softly. "I know it hasn't been long," Noah continued, "and I know you might think it's too soon after losing your husband. But I've come to care for you and your children deeply." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. "Noah, I'm not asking for anything right now," he hastened to add. "Just permission to stay longer, to see where this might lead." Katherine looked out across the land that she had fought so hard to keep, the land that represented her children's future. She thought of how empty it had felt before Noah and Sarah had arrived, and how full of life it seemed now. "I would like that very much," she whispered. Noah's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, his calloused fingers intertwining with her own. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "I haven't been entirely truthful about why Sarah and I were passing through." Katherine tensed. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't just drifting," Noah explained. "I came looking for you specifically." Confusion furrowed Katherine's brow. "I don't understand." "Thomas and I served together in the war," Noah said. "We were friends. When I heard he had died, I wanted to check on his family to see if you needed help." He smiled ruefully. "Took me a while to track you down." Katherine stared at him in shock. "Thomas never mentioned you. We lost touch after the war," Noah admitted. "I went west, he came here, but I never forgot him. When I heard about his passing, it felt like the right thing to do." Tears filled Katherine's eyes. "All this time." "I didn't tell you at first because I didn't want you to think I was intruding," Noah explained. "And then, well, things got complicated with Slater and Caldwell." "And you stayed to help," Katherine finished for him. Noah nodded. "But that's not why I want to stay now." His eyes met hers, intense in the fading light. "I want to stay because somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, Katherine Morgan. With your strength, your determination, your love for your children." Katherine felt as though her heart might burst. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she whispered. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of me was gone forever." "And now?" Noah asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Now I know better," Katherine replied, leaning toward him. "I know that my heart has room for new love, for you." Their lips met in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened, years of loneliness melting away in the warmth of newfound love. When they finally pulled apart, Katherine rested her forehead against Noah's, tears of happiness sliding down her cheeks. "What about Sarah?" she asked. "How does she feel about all this?" Noah chuckled. "Sarah's been pushing me to speak up for days now. She adores you and the children." As if summoned by her name, Sarah appeared in the doorway, Elizabeth and James peering around her legs. "Is it official yet?" Sarah asked, her eyes bright with hope. "Are we staying?" Noah looked at Katherine, a question in his eyes. She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said, "you're staying." Elizabeth broke free from Sarah's side and ran to her mother, throwing her arms around her neck. "Does this mean Mr. Ryder is going to be our new papa?" she asked eagerly. Katherine glanced at Noah, who was watching the scene with undisguised emotion. "Would you like that?" she asked her daughter carefully. Elizabeth nodded vigorously. "He tells the best stories. And he promised to teach James to fish." "Well then," Katherine said, reaching for Noah's hand again, "I suppose we'll have to see about making that happen." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Katherine stood before the small church in Promise Creek, her children beside her and Sarah across from them, as she and Noah exchanged their vows. The entire community had turned out for the wedding, including Sheriff Davis, who stood as Noah's best man. "I never thought I'd find love again," Katherine said, her voice clear and strong as she spoke her vows. "You came into our lives when we needed you most, and you stayed because you chose to. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of our lives." Noah's eyes shone as he placed the ring on her finger. "You showed me what true courage looks like," he replied. "You and these children have given me a home when I thought I'd always be wandering. I promise to protect and cherish you all the days of my life." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Katherine felt Elizabeth and James pressing against her skirts, while Sarah stood tall and proud beside her father. They were no longer two broken families but one whole one, forged in adversity and bound by love. Later, as they danced under the stars at the celebration held at their home, Katherine looked up at her new husband with wonder. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. "If you hadn't come along when Slater was at our door." Noah pulled her closer. "I think some things are meant to be, Katherine Ryder. I would have found you one way or another. Take me, not my children," she whispered, echoing her desperate plea from that first day. "That's what I said when I thought we were in danger. And now?" Noah asked, his arms strong around her. Katherine smiled, looking over to where their children played together, their laughter carrying across the yard. "Now you have all of us, and we have you." As the music swelled around them, Katherine knew that the home she had fought so hard to keep had finally become what Thomas had always intended, not just a piece of land, but a place of love, family, and hope for the future.